The wind tugged at her veil as Claire stepped onto the garden path, her heart pounding louder than the music. Rows of guests turned to watch. But then he was there, Rusty, her old Labrador, planted firmly in front of her, eyes locked on hers. He didn't bark, he didn't move. He just stared, trembling slightly, and in that instant, Claire knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. She had dreamed of this day since she was a teenager. A small wedding in her parents' garden, surrounded by flowers and people she loved. Daniel standing beneath the archway, smiling, the sun filtering through the trees, and Rusty, always Rusty, by her side. But he wasn't walking beside her now. He was blocking her path. Claire looked down at him, her hand gripping the bouquet just a little too tight. His breathing was shallow, his legs unsteady. His eyes, soft brown and full of something she couldn't quite name, held her in place. "Rusty, baby, what's wrong?" she whispered. All around her people waited. Her father gestured to keep going. Her mother looked anxious, but Claire didn't move. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Instead, it felt like something was shifting beneath her feet. And in that moment, she had no idea what was about to unfold. Claire Bennett had always been the kind of person who listened before speaking. Maybe that's why kids loved her so much. Her classroom was more like a sanctuary than a schoolroom. But it was Rusty who had first taught her to listen with her heart. She found him 12 years ago, a shivering puppy left outside a gas station on the edge of town. His fur was patchy, his ribs visible. She wrapped him in her jacket and whispered, "It's okay, I've got you now," and she always did. Rusty was there when her college roommate died in a car accident. He was there through heartbreaks, job interviews, family fights. When Daniel came into her life, Rusty didn't bark or growl. He simply walked up and leaned his body against the stranger's legs. That was Rusty's way. Quiet, certain. So when he blocked her path on her wedding day, Claire knew to trust him. But everything around her screamed otherwise. The garden was buzzing with whispers. The violinist faltered. Her father, Walter, marched toward her with stiff determination. "Claire, honey, we really need to keep going," he said under his breath, reaching for Rusty's collar. "Wait," she said sharply. Rusty growled, a low, unfamiliar sound that sent a ripple of discomfort through the gathered crowd. Claire dropped to her knees, ignoring the way her gown bunched in the dirt. Her hands cupped his face, feeling the heat beneath his fur, the way his chest rose in shallow, rapid bursts. "Talk to me, buddy," she murmured. "What's going on?" From the edge of the path, Daniel took a cautious step forward. "Is he okay?" he asked gently. Claire didn't answer. She couldn't, because suddenly memories flooded in. Rusty hiding under the porch the week before, skipping meals, refusing to climb stairs. She'd been so busy with flower arrangements, seating charts, final fittings. She'd told herself he was just tired, just old. But now she knew better. The murmurs grew louder. Her mother, Elaine, called from behind the guests, voice trembling with irritation. "Claire, sweetheart, what's happening?" Claire looked up, eyes wet and full of fear, then down again, to the dog who had never left her side. And something inside her whispered, "This is where the real ceremony begins." Claire had imagined that moment for years. Not the dresses or the cake or the first dance. None of that ever mattered much to her. What she dreamed of, what she needed, was that walk down the garden path, sunlight filtering through the oaks, the air smelling of lavender and soil. She would walk toward Daniel with Rusty trotting by her side, just like he had on their morning runs, on rainy nights curled at her feet, on every hard day she'd survived. That walk was meant to honor not just a union between two people, but the bond that had carried her to it. So when Rusty collapsed onto his haunches and wouldn't move, her dream cracked, quietly, but irreversibly. Walter crouched beside her, frustrated. "Claire, sweetheart, he's just anxious. You know how dogs pick up on nerves. Let me carry him off to the side, and you can keep going." She didn't answer. Her hands trembled as she pressed her palm to Rusty's ribs. His breathing was still shallow. The slight tremor in his legs hadn't stopped. Daniel spoke again, this time more urgently. "Claire, should we call someone?" "I think something's wrong with his heart," she said softly, mostly to herself. Walter straightened, exasperated. "We're not veterinarians, Claire. You've been planning this wedding for a year. You've got 70 people waiting. You waited for this." "I know," she said, but her voice was far away. Claire looked up at Daniel, still standing at the altar, uncertain but concerned. He met her eyes and mouthed, "Do what you need to do." That was all it took. She turned to her father, her voice clear now. "I need the car keys." "What?" "I'm taking him to the emergency clinic, now." Walter stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. Elaine gasped behind the rows of white chairs. Someone dropped a glass. A child whimpered. But Claire was already lifting Rusty into her arms, the heavy weight of him pressing against her ribs. Her bouquet fell to the ground. The train of her gown dragged across the stone path, collecting dirt and petals. Her world narrowed to the rhythm of his heartbeat. Daniel ran ahead to open the passenger door. "I'll drive," he said without hesitation. She nodded, sliding into the back seat with Rusty sprawled across her lap, his head nestled into the crook of her arm. Claire didn't look back at the garden. She didn't need to, because in that moment she believed, foolishly maybe, that if they moved fast enough, if she just held him tightly enough, she could still fix everything. The drive to the emergency clinic was a blur of headlights and silence. Claire cradled Rusty's head in her lap, her fingers moving slowly through his fur, whispering things she didn't even realize she was saying. Old lullabies, inside jokes, quiet prayers. Daniel's jaw was tight as he drove, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. "We're almost there," he said, though his voice cracked. The dashboard clock blinked 4:23 p.m. Her wedding should have been starting now. Instead, Claire was in the back seat of her car, covered in lace and sweat, with her best friend struggling to breathe. Rusty's eyes fluttered open every few seconds. He didn't whimper. He didn't panic. He just looked at her, and that look was what undid her. She'd seen those eyes after her grandmother died, after she'd lost her first job, after every heartbreak she thought would ruin her. They always said the same thing. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." But now he looked tired. When they reached the clinic, Dr. Mark Collins was already waiting outside, phone in hand, expression grave. Claire had known him since high school. He'd treated Rusty since he was a puppy. Without a word, Daniel helped lift Rusty onto the stretcher, and Dr. Collins guided them into a private room in the back. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly. The air smelled like antiseptic and something colder, like endings. Claire didn't let go of Rusty's paw the entire time. Dr. Collins examined him in silence, his movements gentle, respectful. Finally, he straightened, took a breath and sat across from them. "Claire," he began softly, "Rusty's heart is failing. He has congestive heart failure. It's progressed fast, and today's stress likely pushed him past the edge." She blinked, staring at him like she didn't understand the words. I don't understand," she said. "He was walking last week. He played with Sophie's dog. He was tired. Sure, but not this." "I know," Collins said gently. "This kind of condition can stay hidden until it suddenly doesn't. The signs were there. He just didn't want to worry you." Claire's eyes filled again. "Of course he didn't. We can give him medication," the vet continued, "to keep him comfortable. But we're talking about weeks, maybe months. He's not in pain now, but he's very, very tired." Claire pressed her forehead to Rusty's. "I didn't see it," she whispered. "I was so caught up in table settings and seating charts and cake tastings." Daniel touched her shoulder. "You couldn't have known." "But he knew," she said almost angrily. "He stopped me. He blocked me. He knew something was wrong and he tried to tell me. He—" Her voice cracked into a sob. Dr. Collins nodded solemnly. "He trusted you. That's why he didn't let you walk away. That was his way of saying, 'I need you now.'" For a moment, no one spoke. Then Claire asked, barely audible, "What do we do now?" Dr. Collins looked between them. "You love him. You stay close. You give him comfort. And when the time comes, you let him go with dignity." It was the first time Claire realized this wasn't about saving him, it was about saying goodbye the right way. Her hands trembled as she brushed a tear from Rusty's eye. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have seen it. I should have—" Rusty shifted weakly and let out a small breath, a sound that felt almost forgiving. Daniel knelt beside her. "Whatever you need," he said. "We'll do it together." And just then, the clinic door creaked open. Claire turned, startled, to find Sophie standing there, bouquet still in hand, her dress wrinkled, eyes wet. "I figured you might need someone," she said. Behind her were Walter, Elaine, and the minister. No one said much. They just came in quietly, surrounding her with warmth. Claire looked around the small, sterile room, at the faces she loved most, at the dog who had carried her through every chapter of her life, and somehow, amidst all the grief, a strange, fragile idea began to form. For a long time, no one spoke. The hum of the overhead lights filled the silence. Claire sat on the clinic floor in her wedding dress, leaning against the exam table with Rusty's head resting on her lap. The others had gathered in the room, but they kept a respectful distance, letting her be with him. Sophie slid down beside her, resting her chin on her knees. "You know," she said softly, "you don't have to let the day disappear." Claire gave a bitter laugh. "It already has." "No," Sophie said, reaching out to touch her hand. "Not if you change what it means." Claire didn't answer. She kept running her fingers along the curve of Rusty's ear. The fabric of her dress was smudged with fur and tears. Her heart felt like it had cracked open. Then Walter stepped closer. His voice was quieter than usual. "You know," he said, "your mother and I were married in a barn during a thunderstorm. Nothing went the way we planned." Claire looked up, surprised. "But we still remember it as the best day of our lives, because the people we loved were there. And it was real." He glanced down at Rusty. "Just like this." Elaine nodded behind him, already dabbing her eyes with a tissue. And then the minister, who had been silent all this time, took a gentle step forward. "If you'd like," he said, "we could still have the ceremony. Right here. With him." Claire froze. A ceremony here? In a vet clinic, with her dog dying? But then she looked at Rusty. His tail gave the faintest thump against her leg. His eyes opened just enough to meet hers. She could have sworn. He understood. She turned to Daniel. "Would you really want that here?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "I want you," he said. "Wherever, however, I don't care about the place. I care about the promise." Claire bit her lip, feeling something shift in her chest. Not joy, not resolution, but a flicker of clarity, quiet, warm, and honest. Maybe this wasn't the wedding she imagined, but maybe it was the one that mattered. She looked down at Rusty again. He didn't know time or tradition. He only knew love, and that she could still give him. The exam room was transformed, awkwardly, imperfectly, but full of heart. Sophie draped a white sheet over the IV stand. Elaine found a vase in the waiting room and filled it with leftover reception flowers from her car. The overhead lights dimmed slightly. Someone even played soft acoustic music from a phone speaker, propped between a box of gloves and a stack of vet files. Claire stood near the window, her dress wrinkled and stained, but still beautiful. She glanced at her reflection. Hair tangled, eyeliner smudged, and for the first time that day, smiled. This wasn't the wedding she planned. It was more than that. Daniel stood at the front, still in his shirt and slacks from earlier, his boutonniere barely hanging on. His eyes never left hers. Rusty lay on a soft blanket on the floor between them, IV gently taped to his leg, tail barely moving, but present, alive. When the minister cleared his throat and began, no one breathed too loudly. The vows were whispered not for effect, but out of reverence. Claire's voice trembled. "I thought today would be about celebration," she said, her hand gripping Daniel's. "But it turns out it's about remembering what love really is." Daniel's voice cracked too. "I always thought you were strong, because you kept everything together. But now I see. You're strongest when you let it fall apart for what really matters." A few people wiped their eyes. Sophie snapped a photo silently. Then came the moment. "You may kiss the bride." They leaned in, laughing softly through tears. Claire knelt immediately afterward, placing her forehead gently against Rusty's. His tail thumped once, soft, content, and that was enough. The room, the clinic, the heartbreak, everything faded for a moment. What remained was stillness, real love. Grief and joy intertwined like vines climbing the same tree. Outside, the sun was beginning to dip, casting golden light through the window. Claire looked up and exhaled. "I think," she whispered, "this was always how it was supposed to happen." But even as she said it, a flicker of fear stirred deep inside. Later that evening, after the guests had gone, Claire and Daniel sat on the floor of their living room. They hadn't planned a reception, and they didn't need one. They ate Chinese takeout straight from the containers. Claire still wore her dress, Daniel his half-undone tie. Rusty was curled up between them, head resting on a folded towel, IV removed, his breath shallow but peaceful. They didn't say much, just held hands, occasionally fed Rusty small pieces of rice or chicken, gently stroked his ears. But as the night grew quieter, so did Claire's heart. There was something unsaid sitting between them, a truth she didn't want to name. Daniel finally broke the silence. "He looks comfortable," he said. Claire nodded, but her lips quivered. "Yeah, but he's not himself anymore, not really." Daniel turned toward her. "You think it's time?" Claire blinked away, fresh tears. "Not tonight, but soon. I can feel it. He's holding on for me." Daniel put his arm around her. "Then we'll hold on for him, until he tells us it's okay." Claire looked at Rusty. "What if I don't know how to let go?" Daniel didn't try to answer. He just pressed his lips against her temple and whispered, "You will, when it's time, because that's what love does too." They sat that way for a long while, until Rusty stirred and let out a low, contented sigh. And somewhere inside her, Claire realized, goodbyes don't always come with doors slamming or hearts breaking. Sometimes they come softly, like a breath, like a dog gently curling into your lap, like a wedding vow whispered in a vet clinic, between the lines of love and loss. Spring came slowly that year. The days grew longer, but inside Claire, everything still felt paused, like time was holding its breath with her. Rusty was still there, sleeping more, eating less. Some days he managed a short walk around the yard. Other days he didn't lift his head at all. Claire never left his side. She cancelled her honeymoon, postponed everything else. She taught her students remotely from the couch, her voice soft so as not to wake him. Daniel cooked, cleaned, called the vet when needed. He didn't complain, not once. They had created a world where love lived gently, measured not in grand gestures but in moments, in whispered good mornings, in the brush of fur against skin, in the sound of a sigh at 3 a.m. Then, one morning, Claire woke to birdsong and found Rusty already sitting by the sliding door watching the sunrise. She smiled. "You want to go out?" He didn't bark, but his tail moved once. Enough. She helped him onto the grass, wrapped in a blanket, and they sat together by the rose bushes, his favorite spot, the same place she used to read to him when he was a puppy, the same place he waited every day when she came home from work. Daniel brought out coffee and joined them. No one spoke. They just existed together, and after a while, Rusty rested his head on Claire's leg. His breathing slowed. She leaned down, pressed her cheek to his head, her voice trembling. "You can go, Rusty. If you need to, I'll be okay." Daniel put his hand on her back, and with one final exhale, deep, slow, like wind slipping through trees, Rusty was gone. No gasps, no panic, just stillness. Claire froze. Her hands didn't move, but her heart did, because in that silence she heard it. Not the absence, but the gift. The grace of a friend who stayed just long enough to make sure she'd be all right, who waited for her to say goodbye, so he could finally rest. She buried her face in his fur and wept, not with desperation, but with gratitude. They buried him beneath the rose bush. Claire placed one of her wedding flowers above the fresh soil, a white peony. "He carried me all the way here," she whispered. Daniel pulled her into his arms. "You carried each other. he said, and as the wind danced gently through the trees, Claire felt it for the first time in days. Peace. Weeks passed, and the silence left behind by Rusty was louder than any sound Claire had ever known. At first, she moved through the house like a ghost. Every room held a memory: the corner by the fireplace, the scratch marks by the back door, the empty food bowl she still couldn't bring herself to wash. But slowly, something began to shift. One afternoon, she found an old photo album. Tucked between birthday snapshots and blurry park selfies was a picture Sophie had taken, Claire and Daniel exchanging vows in that tiny clinic room, Rusty laying at their feet, his eyes half closed, tail curled like a comma at the end of a sentence. Claire stared at it for a long time, not crying, just breathing. It didn't feel like an end. It felt like a beginning she hadn't recognized. So she started visiting the local shelter. At first, just to walk the older dogs, the ones no one ever adopted, then to donate supplies, then to sit quietly in the corner and just be with them. She and Daniel created a small fund in Rusty's name to help cover adoption fees for senior dogs. Every time one found a home, Claire felt a piece of her heart settle back into place. Rusty hadn't just taught her about love, he'd taught her how to keep loving, even after. Because some love doesn't disappear. It becomes something you pass forward. Have you ever been changed by a love that couldn't speak, but said everything with a look? If you've shared your life with a pet who saved you in ways no one else could, tell us in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone needs to read today. And if Rusty's journey touched your heart, even just a little, consider leaving a like. It helps us share more stories that remind us what really matters, because love doesn't always come with grand gestures. Sometimes it comes on 4 legs with muddy paws and eyes that never leave yours. And when it's gone, it leaves behind more than memories. It leaves behind a map, showing you how to keep loving forward. Subscribe if you believe in second chances, quiet heroes, and the kind of love that never really ends. We have many more stories to tell, and some might just feel like yours.